Up next in the broadcast, Korea's tax revenue comes in $10 billion shy of the government's goal for 2014. For the third straight year, collections have fallen short of expectations, and that's creating a strain on fulfilling welfare pledges. The opposition party grills President Park's new prime minister nominee at the National Assembly, accusing the candidate of intimidating the press and skirting active military service. The tales of long nights in Korea because of work or play have some new statistics as backup. A report from the OECD shows Koreans average the lowest amount of sleep among member countries. Primetime News begins now.
Welcome to the program. You're watching Primetime News, live from Seoul. I am Kang Tae-ri.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We begin with the shortfall in the government's coffers. That comes amid the ongoing debate over whether to fund welfare pledges without a tax hike.
Korea's finance ministry reports that tax revenue fell short of its target for a third straight year in 2014. Our Hwang Jie has the details.
Korea's tax revenue came in at around 205 trillion won, or roughly $190 billion last year. That is $10 billion shy of the government's goal. Last year's shortfall was the largest on record, breaching that posted at the height of the Asian financial crisis in 1998. The finance ministry largely attributes the shortfall to sluggish corporate tax revenue stemming from companies' weak performances. It also says slumping domestic demand and a strengthening Korean won against the greenback prompted a fall in value-added taxes and customs duties. For next year, the government is aiming to collect tax revenue that's up around 2% from last year's target. It's confident about the goal, saying it will push through structural reforms and economic revitalization plans this year. But experts are skeptical about it.
The pace of recovery in China and in European countries is likely to fall below expectations this year, and the economy at home is not showing signs of a strong recovery either.
Given that Korea's tax revenue is expected to fall short of the government target for the fourth straight year in 2015, which could limit government spending on key areas. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye and the ruling party have agreed to form a bi-weekly consultative body between the presidential office, the government, and the ruling party. The party's policy chief said the meeting, which will likely start later this month, will aim to bolster policy coordination. The president has been heavily criticized for a lack of communication skills when handling state affairs. Following her remarks yesterday that there will be no tax hike to cover welfare programs, she stressed today that what's more important right now is to revitalize the economy. On that note, she sought party support for the passage of related bills. Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan, who is in Istanbul to attend an international meeting, says Korea needs to focus more on reforming its economic structure rather than on its monetary policies. Our Shin Sa-min has more.
Korea's finance minister Choi Kyung-hwan says the country's interest rate policy will be locked in for some time as the domestic economy shows steady recovery while inflation remains balanced. Speaking with Reuters ahead of the two-day G20 finance ministers meeting in Istanbul, Choi said the economic reform is key for the Korean economy.
The major issue that we should solve for our economy is reforming its structure rather than cutting or raising interest rates.
He said the Korean government has identified the labor, education, financial, and public sectors as major areas that need change so the nation can avoid falling into a drawn-out period of sluggish growth. He also commented on the obstacles ahead.
This year's challenge would be risky as the global economy may not be recovering as fast as we expected. Low oil prices are absolutely good news for the Korean economy, but it also has various risk factors at the same time. There will be another challenge that we could face this year.
On the global economic front, the finance minister said the European Central Bank's recent monetary policy may benefit the export-reliant Korean economy, as it could drive up demand for products from Asian countries. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
China's steady stream of steel shipments has led to a supply glut in global markets, and with Chinese steel exports hitting a new high in January, for Korean steelmakers, more woes are expected ahead. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
Steelmakers in Korea are in for a tough year, especially with growing shipments from China in a market already suffering from an oversupply. China, the world's largest steelmaker, exported 10.3 million tons of steel products in January, up more than 50% from a year ago. The gain comes despite a new tax rule in China that was expected to curb the country's steel shipments this year. China ditched a tax rebate of 9 to 13% on steel products that contain boron, a chemical added to steel products to increase quality. Many Chinese steelmakers had taken advantage of the tax rebate system, enjoying a return equivalent to roughly $30 to $40 for every ton of steel exported. But with no signs of the supply glut dwindling, analysts in Korea say the country's steelmakers have a rough year ahead of them.
Chinese steelmakers have turned to other chemical products that are still subject to tax rebate. And due to China's oversupply of steel products, exports will remain robust. Falling prices will also add to Korean steelmakers' woes.
Experts say Korean companies need to focus on lowering their prices in order to gain a stronger foothold in the market. Korea shipped just under 370,000 tons of steel to China last month, down more than 8% from a year ago. In the same period, Korea's imports of Chinese steel rose about 1%. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The confirmation hearing for Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-gu, which began this morning, continues on this evening at the National Assembly. It will be a tough ride for him as he's facing a mounting series of allegations against him. Our National Assembly correspondent Park Ji-won reports.
The two-day confirmation hearing for Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-gu got underway at the National Assembly on Tuesday. Lee, the ruling Senate Party floor leader up until late last month, began by expressing his regret over a series of allegations against him that have piled up in recent weeks.
As I was preparing for this confirmation hearing, I was once again reminded of how small and problematic I was. I bitterly regret my deficiencies.
The 65-year-old three-term lawmaker is facing a tough road ahead amid various allegations surrounding his past. These range from accusations of real estate speculation to doubts about whether he and his son properly fulfilled their mandatory military service. However, questions about his attempts to wield his influence over reporters was one of the main issues of contention between the rival parties. The debate grew so intense that the hearing was suspended temporarily. Lee emphasized that comments he made regarding his ability to pull strings at some news outlets were said during a private lunch with a few journalists. Lawmakers from the main opposition party called for the recording of his remarks to be played at the hearing, but the ruling Senate Party objected the idea.
We refuse to allow the recording, which was illegally acquired. If opposition party lawmakers go against our objections and attempt to play the tape, they'll be going against the spirit of compromise.
We just want to know whether his remarks are something that could have been made casually at a private gathering or whether it was an indirect, implicit threat against the media.
Opposition party lawmakers released a recording to reporters at the assembly, but they vowed to continue with the hearing process. Lee's hearing is scheduled to end Wednesday, and lawmakers will vote Thursday. President Park Geun-hye's attempt to replace incumbent Prime Minister Chung Hong-won has so far failed, with two previous nominees both withdrawing from consideration for the post. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
There are many eyes on the actions of the newly elected opposition party chairman, Moon Jae-in. Recent polls show his ratings have gone up since his election. While some say his political attitude has become more flexible, others say his new style is just a ploy to win more votes. Our Kwon So-ah tells us more.
He lost the 2012 presidential election. But Moon Jae-in has bounced back into a position of power as the main opposition party's new leader, and his popularity is growing strong. In fact, a recent public opinion poll by Realmeter showed more than 22% of people see Moon as a potential presidential candidate for 2017. He now has more support than UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, who's been eyed as a favorite for months. The pollster says Moon's unprecedented visit to the graves of former presidents Lee Seung-man and Park Chung-hee the day after his election was viewed in a positive light by supporters of both the ruling and main opposition parties. Moon said he paid respect to the right-wing leaders to realize national unity. Watchers say Moon has adapted his political views since his defeat to President Park. But critics say his change of face is a mere tactic to garner more supporters and that he needs to do more.
President Park Geun-hye stole the spotlight back in 2012 with her welfare and economy pledges. Moon has changed quite a bit seemingly in preparation for the 2017 presidential election. But to show his sincerity, he needs to come with different policies.
Analysts add that while welfare is the current subject of discussion in Korea, Moon should lean towards other policy changes, such as inter-Korean issues, but with a more conservative approach. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
A high-ranking U.S. official on a regional tour of Asia says Washington is not trying to interfere in a possible meeting between the leaders of both Koreas in Russia this spring, but it does believe inter-Korean talks may be key to denuclearizing North Korea. Our Ji Myung-gil has more.
U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Tony Blinken was asked by Seoul-based Yonhap News Agency whether Washington supports a possible meeting between President Park Geun-hye and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at a war anniversary ceremony in Russia. He responded by saying that such a decision relies solely on President Park. Blinken said the U.S. strongly supports President Park's efforts to hold inter-Korean talks as it could help pave the way for Pyongyang to drop its nuclear ambitions. However, he believes Pyongyang is not showing sincerity towards positive engagement or denuclearization. Blinken's trip to Seoul comes amid lingering concerns that Washington's tougher stance on North Korea may hamper Seoul's bid for dialogue. U.S. slapped fresh sanctions on North Korea last month following its alleged cyber attack on Sony Pictures. Before departing for China, the top American official stressed the role of Beijing and its exceptional leverage over Pyongyang. He said the biggest instability in the region was Pyongyang's nuclear pursuit and that China could persuade Pyongyang to resume credible disarmament talks, given its long-standing ties. At his last stop in Tokyo, the high-ranking U.S. official is expected to discuss regional issues such as Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. Seoul continues to demand a sincere apology from Tokyo over the matter as a catalyst to break the current icy relations between the neighboring countries. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
There is a sacrifice to those long hours of studying, working, or playing, which Koreans are well known for, and that's getting a good night's sleep. But sleep deprivation can wreak havoc to one's mind and body. Kim Ji-yeon tells us the details of how sleep is becoming more of a rare commodity these days.
Hunched shoulders, dark circles under droopy eyelids, excessive yawning. These are telltale signs of sleep deprivation, a common condition among Koreans. The national sleep average is less than 8 hours, which is the lowest among OECD member countries. But with many trying to handle demanding academic and work schedules, getting decent sleep has become a difficult task.
I sleep 3 to 4 hours a day during the academic semester. I feel absent-minded all day, so I try to get fresh air from time to time and try to sleep while commuting.
These days, I sleep like 5 hours because of night culture in Korea. My company has a lot of meetings and conferences, and after that we go drinking, and so it's really hard to go sleep.
Coping with loss of sleep is a challenge that's often handled individually. Nevertheless, doctors say getting quality shut-eye is important as it plays a critical role in our problem-solving and decision-making. Sleep deprivation can also lead to injuries and even deaths, such as when one's driving, by creating attention deficits. And if the condition becomes chronic, it can severely degrade one's health.
The immune system will start to fail, inducing all sorts of diseases, including arrhythmia, diabetes, and stroke. It's important to ask for help and receive treatment, particularly for those suffering from insomnia for more than 3 months.
If aroma candles and counting sheet don't work, what can one do to get a good night's rest? Specialized medical centers have popped up in recent years using physical and psychological methods to treat insomnia patients. A 5 to 8 week program to change one's cognitive and behavioral patterns could also help to reclaim those precious sleep hours. Kim Jung, Arirang News.
Shifting our focus to the Middle East, Syria says that it has been receiving U.S. intelligence on airstrikes targeting Islamic State militants inside its borders.
With more, we turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, although there's been no confirmation from the Pentagon, Syria's president has come out to speak on the matter.
That's right. Bashar al-Assad has publicly revealed that his government allegedly received messages from the American military about those aerial bombings inside Syria, but he stressed that there was no direct cooperation in carrying out those operations. This latest revelation came during an interview with the BBC published on Tuesday, in which Assad denied his forces had been dropping barrel bombs on rebel-held areas, killing thousands of civilians. He also ruled out joining the international coalition that is seeking to destroy IS. That coalition of Western and Arab states has been battering IS targets across Iraq and Syria since last September. Following its recent surge in bombing runs against the jihadist group, Jordan said the U.S.-led operations have killed about 7,000 IS militants. And shifting to Europe, the new Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras says he's confident in reaching a compromise on his country's bailout program. This despite wide differences remaining between Athens and its European creditors. The anti-austerity leader warned any impasse due to political reasons would, quote, torpedo Greece's European future. He made the statement from Vienna, where he held talks with the Austrian chancellor, who said the goal must be to keep Athens in the Eurozone. Earlier speaking before Greece's parliament, Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis called the current bailout program a toxic and ineffective drug prescribed by the Eurozone.
If I believe that a retreat and an acceptance of the current bailout program, which as regards its logic and philosophy remains unchanged from 2010, would at some point, perhaps with some difficulty and pain, take Greece out of the crisis, I would recommend we go ahead and submit without dogmatism and egotism. But I don't believe it.
An emergency meeting of Eurozone finance ministers will be held on Wednesday, while Greek officials will present a fresh proposal. According to a source cited by the New York Times, the detailed compromise will keep about 70% of the current bailout terms. And finally, controversy is brewing over the U.S. broadcaster NBC News. Nightly news anchor Brian Williams is under fire after admitting to reporting false war stories from Iraq more than a decade ago. The embattled anchor has since apologized and announced a hiatus from his post. Our Connie Lee has more.
Good evening, I'm Lester Holt.
It's Lester Holt filling in for Brian Williams on NBC's Nightly News. Williams, who's been anchoring this newscast for more than 10 years now, remained off the air on Monday as controversy swirled around him. Holt addressed the issue.
We want to take just a moment to tell you where Brian is tonight. In a message to his colleagues over the weekend, Brian told us he's taking several days off this broadcast amid questions over how he recalled certain stories he covered. He'll be off while this issue is dealt with.
Williams took himself off the air over the weekend because of a false claim that he was on a helicopter that was hit by a grenade in Iraq back in 2003. Over the years, Williams has retold the story many times, but has now admitted the claim was false after veterans from the incident reported on social media and media outlets that Williams was not on that helicopter.
I want to apologize. I said I was traveling in an aircraft that was hit by RPG fire. I was instead in a following aircraft.
In the first published interview out on Monday in the U.S. military newspaper Stars and Stripes, Williams said he assumed the helicopter took damage. But despite his apology and explanation, many journalists and military personnel are calling for his resignation. NBC has launched an internal investigation into Williams, who is now also facing scrutiny over statements he made on other major news events. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
And that wraps up our look at international stories for now. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello everyone, I'm Stephen Che with the Sports Brief. South Korea is headed to their first Women's World Cup in 12 years, and on Tuesday, Korea's football body laid out its preparation roadmap. The Korea Football Association announced several tune-up matches running up to the World Cup kickoff on June 6th. Now they'll take part in the 12-nation Cyprus Cup from March 4th. Then they'll face Russia twice at home on April 4th and 8th for their first official friendly matches in Korea in 17 years. And to top it all off, they'll face the second-ranked USA team on May 30th. Now the training will help them towards their goal of reaching the round of 16 at the global competition. And over to the live games. First to the KBL, the Dongbu Promi faced the Mobis Phoebus. Now, they kept it close in the first half, but the Promi created a rift from the third quarter. David Simon had a 21-10 double-double, but the man of the night was Kim Ju-sung, who in his milestone 600th game led his team to the victory. And flying over to pro volleyball with two matches in Daejeon. First to the ladies. The #1 Korea Expressway Zenith barely broke a sweat against KGC in the straight sets victory. Nicole Fawcett and company had another fine match to hold first on the standings. And to the men, the Samsung Hwajae Blue Fangs were nearly flawless in their sweep over the OK Savings Bank Russian Cash. And with the win, the #1 Blue Fangs now have a 7-point lead over the Bees on the standings. Moving on, FIFA's electoral committee has confirmed the 4 candidates running for the World Football Governing Body's presidency. Incumbent president since 1998, Sepp Blatter, Dutch football chairman Michael van Praag, FIFA VP and Jordanian Prince Ali bin Al Hussein, and Portugal football legend Luis Figo passed the committee's integrity checks and are set for the vote. The election will take place during the FIFA Congress in Zurich, Switzerland on May 29th. And finally, to the NBA, the San Antonio Spurs' Greg Popovich has joined some very rare company, earning his 1,000th win as a head coach. With the Spurs beating the Indiana Pacers 95-93 on Monday, he became the 9th coach in NBA history to reach the milestone and only the 2nd to do it with a single team. Now, the 5-time NBA champion coach isn't slowing down, however, as the defending champion Spurs seek their 18th straight playoff berth under his watch.
I would just like to say thank you.
And that's all I have for sports. Your weather's up next. Good night.
Hello, I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather outlook. It seems like the cold front has moved out, but micro dust has moved in, and it looks like higher than normal levels should continue through tomorrow. Over on the eastern part of the country, the air remains extremely dry, and this, along with the micro dust, is causing some frustration for those with respiratory problems. As for tomorrow, less than 5 millimeters of light rain is expected for the Chungcheongdo and Jeollado provinces, as well as Jeju. Other than that, it looks like we won't have have to worry about a cold snap for a while, but nationwide showers are in store on Sunday. On to tomorrow's readings. Seoul would hit 7, meanwhile Daegu and Busan reach 11. Moving on, Jeju reaches up to 12, Dokdo hits 7. That's all I have for you now, and let's take a look at the international weather.
And that's primetime news for this Tuesday. Thanks for watching. I'm Sean Lim.
And I'm Kang Tae. Have a great evening. We'll see you again soon.